My name is Sahara. I'm 31 years old. I work as a senior graphic designer at a mid-sized marketing firm, and for most of my life, I believed that if I just worked hard enough, stayed patient enough, smiled through the pain long enough, my family would eventually see me. Really see me. They never did. But here's what I want you to know before I tell you everything. The moment that finally broke me wasn't a scream. It wasn't a slammed door or a dramatic scene at a holiday table. It was quiet. It was a Tuesday morning phone call. My mother's voice, bright as a bell, completely unbothered, saying, and I will never forget these exact words, "Sahara, baby, we had to cancel your trip. But don't worry, you'll understand when you're older." I was 30 years old. I had been planning that anniversary vacation for 8 months, and I never got to go. This is the story of how my family spent 20 years treating me like the furniture, useful, invisible, and easy to rearrange whenever it suited them. And this is the story of how, on the night of their precious anniversary party, I gave them a gift they will never, ever forget. Let me paint you a picture of the Okafor household. My father, Emmanuel, is a proud man, retired civil engineer, church elder, a man who measures love and achievement and dishes it out accordingly. My mother, Grace, and yes, that is genuinely her name, which I find darkly ironic, is the kind of woman who could smile while twisting a knife and somehow make you apologize for bleeding. She is charming. She is Church Social Committee President charming, and she has spent my entire life perfecting the art of making me feel insane for noticing things that were very obviously happening. Then there is my brother, Tobias. Tobias is 28 years old, 3 years younger than me, and has never, not once, held a job for longer than 14 months. He is also, according to my parents, the family's greatest treasure, their son, their legacy. A young man still finding his path, as my mother calls it, which apparently requires the rest of us to fund the journey indefinitely. I am the oldest. I am the daughter. I put myself through university on scholarships and part-time work because my parents spent what should have been my education fund on Tobias's first failed business venture, a food truck he abandoned after 8 months. I graduated with honors. Nobody came to the ceremony because Tobias had a football tournament that weekend. I know. Looking back, that graduation day should have been the moment I understood exactly what I was dealing with. But I was 22, and I still believed in the version of family I'd seen in other people's homes. I thought, one day, they'll recognize this. One day they'll come around. I held on to that thought for 8 more years. The pattern was so consistent it should have been embarrassing for them. Every time something important happened in my life, something of Tobias's conveniently materialized to overshadow it. My first promotion? Mom called to tell me Tobias had enrolled in a community college course. Finally, she said, finally, he's turning a corner. When I bought my first apartment at 27, saved for 3 years, did it completely alone. My parents visited once, took a brief look around, and spent most of the visit asking if I had a spare room, just in case Tobias needed somewhere to stay while he sorted himself out. I did not give him the room. My mother did not speak to me for 2 weeks after that. The incidents came in waves, and each one was a little worse than the last. The first one I'll tell you about happened 3 years ago. I was dating a wonderful man named David. Thoughtful, steady, kind in the way that matters. We'd been together for a year, and I brought him home for Easter dinner. My mother spent the entire meal interrogating him about his prospects, while simultaneously narrating Tobias's latest idea. He was going to become a real estate agent, she announced, like he'd just been nominated for a Nobel Prize. David sat there politely. I sat there with a smile nailed to my face. On the drive home, David was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Sahara, does your family know anything about your life? Your actual life?" I didn't have an answer. The second incident was at my cousin's wedding, about 2 years ago. I was a bridesmaid. I'd spent months helping plan it. During the reception speeches, my uncle made a touching tribute to all the strong women in this family and listed names. My mother was listed. My aunts were listed. My 2 female cousins were listed. My name was not. When I mentioned it to my mother afterward, quietly because I'm not a scene maker, she looked at me with this expression of genuine confusion and said, "Sahara, You're so sensitive. You know he loves you. Don't make tonight about yourself. I went home and cried in my car for 40 minutes. The third incident is the one that should have been the last. My 30th birthday. 30 felt significant to me. I had worked so hard that entire decade. I had a career I was proud of. I had my apartment, my independence, a small but genuine group of friends who actually showed up for me. I wanted to celebrate with my family. I planned a dinner, nothing extravagant, just a nice restaurant, a reservation a Saturday evening. My mother called the morning of to say that they wouldn't be able to make it. Tobias had a situation. She didn't elaborate. She said we'd reschedule soon, which we never did. Tobias's situation, I later found out from my aunt, was that he'd gotten into a minor argument with a girlfriend and my parents had gone to mediate. I spent my 30th birthday alone in my apartment with takeout and a birthday cake I'd bought myself. And somewhere around 9 o'clock that night, I sat on my kitchen floor and thought very seriously about what kind of relationship I was fighting to maintain and why. But still I stayed. Because despite everything, I still loved them. That's the part nobody tells you about toxic family dynamics. The love is real. It makes the hurt real too. The vacation was my idea, my planning, my money, and my love. My parents were turning 30 years married in June. 30 years is Pearl. It's a milestone. And despite everything, despite all of it, I wanted to give them something meaningful. Maybe I thought if I did something grand enough, generous enough, they'd finally look at me and see the daughter who had been standing there the whole time. I spent 8 months planning a 5-day trip to Portugal for the two of them. Lisbon, the Douro Valley, a wine tour, a beautiful hotel with a balcony that overlooked the river. I researched everything. I booked everything. I paid for everything, the flights, the hotel, the transfers, the tour packages. It came to just over $4,000. $4,000 that I had saved specifically for this. I told them in October. My mother actually cried. She hugged me, a real hug, the kind she almost never gives. My father shook his head and said, "Sahara, this is too much." In that way that meant he was moved. I went home that night feeling for the first time in years, like maybe I had been wrong about us. Maybe we could be okay. I sent them the itinerary. I organized the travel documents. I checked in with them every few weeks to confirm the details. Everything was fine, until the Tuesday morning call in April, 6 weeks before they were supposed to fly out. "Sahara, baby," my mother said, and her voice had that particular lightness it gets when she's decided something and doesn't want a discussion. "We had to cancel the Portugal trip. But don't worry, you'll understand when you're older." I was so shocked I actually laughed. A short, involuntary sound. "What?" I said. "Tobias has his community service leadership parade in June, the youth mentorship program he's been volunteering with. It's the same weekend. Your father and I need to be there. We can't miss it. He worked so hard. I want you to understand something." Tobias had been involved with this youth mentorship program for approximately 4 months. The parade was a local community walk, a Sunday afternoon event that would last, at most, 3 hours. My parents had canceled a 5-day European anniversary trip for a 3-hour Sunday walk. "Mom," I said, very carefully, "I already paid for everything. The flights are non-refundable." "We'll pay you back eventually," she said. "Sahara, don't be dramatic. This is important to your brother. Don't be dramatic." I stood in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, $4,000 gone, 8 months of planning dissolved, and I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter and more final than anger. Like a door closing very slowly and very firmly, and the sound it made when the latch caught. "Okay, Mom," I said.
"See?
"I knew you'd understand," she said. "You've always been so mature."
Mature.
Independent. Sensitive.
Strong.
All the words they used for me when they meant convenient. I hung up the phone. I sat down at my kitchen table.
And I thought, no.
Not this time. Here is what my family did not know about me. They knew the version of Sahara who showed up, helped out, absorbed the disappointments, and came back smiling. They did not know the version of Sahara who had, over the last 2 years, quietly and methodically built a life so independent from them that their approval had become genuinely optional. They did not know that I had been promoted to senior designer 8 months earlier and that my salary had increased significantly. They didn't know because I'd stopped sharing my professional milestones with them after my mother responded to my last promotion news with, "That's nice, but when are you getting married?" They didn't know about the investment account I'd opened at 26, now worth a comfortable sum. And they absolutely did not know what I was about to do. My first call was to the travel insurance company. I had, almost as an afterthought, purchased travel insurance when I booked the Portugal trip. After a very detailed conversation and submission of the cancellation notice my mother had sent me by text, which I had immediately screenshotted and saved, because I am the daughter who documents things, I received a refund of 60% of the total cost. Not everything, but something. My second call was to my Aunt Vera. Aunt Vera is my father's older sister, 70 years old, sharp as a tack, and the only member of my extended family who has ever looked my mother in the eye and said, "Grace, that's not right." She and my mother maintain a careful, cold truce at family events. She had been watching my situation for years with what I can only describe as quiet, patient fury. "I wondered when you were going to call me," Vera said when I explained what had happened. "I need your help with something," I said.
Tell me, she said.
My parents' 30th anniversary party was being planned by, who else, my mother. It was scheduled for the last Saturday of June, at the community hall, with about 60 guests, church friends, neighbors, extended family. My mother had been talking about it for a year. It was going to be a seated dinner, a slideshow, speeches, the works. Tobias was organizing the slideshow. I had a better idea for the slideshow. But first, I needed information. And over the next 6 weeks, between Aunt Vera, my cousin Adiz, and my own careful observations over years of family life, I gathered it. What I was assembling was not a weapon.
I want to be clear about that.
I wasn't trying to destroy anyone. What I was building was a mirror, a complete, honest, documented reflection of 20 years of family history that my parents had been able to avoid looking at because no one had ever held it up in front of them. That was about to change. I also, during this period, did something for myself that I should have done long ago. I booked Portugal. Same hotel, same dates. I pushed it back 2 weeks to July. I went alone. And I want you to know, I will tell you about that trip at the end of this story because it matters. Here is what my family did not know about me. They knew the version of Sahara who showed up, helped out, absorbed the disappointments, and came back smiling. They did not know the version of Sahara who had, over the last 2 years, quietly and methodically built a life so independent from them that their approval had become genuinely optional. They did not know that I had been promoted to senior designer 8 months earlier and that my salary had increased significantly. They didn't know because I'd stopped sharing my professional milestones with them after my mother responded to my last promotion news with, "That's nice, but when are you getting married?" They didn't know about the investment account I'd opened at 26, now worth a comfortable sum. And they absolutely did not know what I was about to do. My first call was to the travel insurance company. I had, almost as an afterthought, purchased travel insurance when I booked the Portugal trip. After a very detailed conversation and submission of the cancellation notice my mother had sent me by text, which I had immediately screenshotted and saved, because I am the daughter who documents things, I received a refund of 60% of the total cost.
Not everything,
But something. My second call was to my Aunt Vera. Aunt Vera is my father's older sister, 70 years old, sharp as a tack, and the only member of my extended family who has ever looked my mother in the eye and said, "Grace, that's not right." She and my mother maintain a careful, cold truce at family events. She had been watching my situation for years with what I can only describe as quiet, patient fury. "I wondered when you were going to call me," Vera said when I explained what had happened. "I need your help with something," I said.
Tell me, she said.
My parents' 30th anniversary party was being planned by, who else, my mother. It was scheduled for the last Saturday of June, at the community hall, with about 60 guests, church friends, neighbors, extended family. My mother had been talking about it for a year. It was going to be a seated dinner, a slideshow, speeches, the works. Tobias was organizing the slideshow. I had a better idea for the slideshow. But first, I needed information. And over the next 6 weeks, between Aunt Vera, my cousin Adiz, and my own careful observations over years of family life, I gathered it. What I was assembling was not a weapon.
I want to be clear about that.
I wasn't trying to destroy anyone. What I was building was a mirror, a complete, honest, documented reflection of 20 years of family history that my parents had been able to avoid looking at because no one had ever held it up in front of them. That was about to change. I also, during this period, did something for myself that I should have done long ago. I booked Portugal. Same hotel. Same dates. I pushed it back 2 weeks to July. I went alone. And I want you to know, I will tell you about that trip at the end of the story because it matters. The party was beautiful, and I mean that sincerely. My mother had worked hard on it. White tablecloths, floral centerpieces. The hall was lit warmly, and 60 people who loved my parents in various capacities were there, dressed up, smiling. Tobias arrived 40 minutes late and was greeted like a returning hero. I arrived early and set up the projector myself.
Dinner was served.
Speeches were made, my uncle, a family friend, my parents' pastor. All warm, all genuinely felt. My mother was glowing. My father looked proud and a little emotional in the way men of his generation get at milestones. Then it was time for the slideshow. My mother tapped the microphone and announced it. Our daughter Sahara put together something special for us tonight. Sahara, come up here. I walked to the front of the room. I was wearing a deep green dress I had bought specifically for this evening. I was calm in a way that surprised even me. 30 years is a long time, I said into the microphone, looking out at 60 faces. It's long enough to build something. It's long enough to make patterns. And it's long enough to look back and ask, honestly, what those patterns have cost. I saw my mother's smile flicker.
Just barely.
I made this for you both. I continued. All of it is true. All of it is love. I pressed play. The first half went exactly as expected. Old photos, the wedding, the early years, the laughter from the audience. My mother was smiling, dabbing at her eyes. My father had his arm around her. Then the second half began. The graduation photo appeared first. Me alone in my cap and gown. The caption underneath, Sahara graduates with honors. June 14th. Immediate family not present. Tobias had a tournament. The room went quiet. The apartment photo. Me alone with my keys. Sahara purchases her first home. October 3rd. Saved entirely independently. The birthday photo. My cake on the counter. The caption. Sahara's 30th birthday. Dinner reservation canceled that morning. Rescheduled date never arranged. And then the Portugal slide. The itinerary. The total cost. The text message from my mother. I heard someone at the back of the room say, softly, "Oh my God." I looked at my parents. My mother's face had gone through several expressions in about 4 seconds, shock, then anger, then something I had never quite seen from her before. Something close to shame.
My father was very still.
Sahara. My mother's voice was tight, controlled. This is not appropriate. Mom, I said, still calm, still at the microphone. It's all true. You are embarrassing this family in front of. I'm showing this family the truth, I said. I wasn't raising my voice. I didn't need to. The room was completely silent. For 30 years you have been celebrated. For 30 years I have celebrated you. I just wanted everyone here, everyone who loves you, to also see the full picture. Tobias was half standing from his chair. Sahara, what the hell? Sit down, Tobias, Aunt Vera said, from her seat in the 3rd row, in a voice that left no room for negotiation. He sat down. I looked back at my parents. My father's jaw was working. My mother had tears running down her face. Real ones, I think, though I was past being able to tell the difference between her real tears and her useful ones. I love you, I said, into the microphone, for everyone to hear. I have always loved you. That's why this hurt as much as it did. And that's why I needed you, and everyone in this room who matters to you, to finally understand what it has felt like to be your daughter. I set the microphone down on the table. I picked up my bag, and I walked out. The parking lot was cool and quiet. I sat in my car for a few minutes with the windows down, listening to the distant murmur of the hall, and I want to describe this accurately. I felt like I'd set down something extraordinarily heavy that I'd been carrying for so long I'd stopped noticing the weight. Aunt Vera found me 20 minutes later. She knocked on my car window, and when I rolled it down, she just took my hand and held it for a moment without saying anything. "Your father came outside," she finally said. "He walked around the parking lot for a while. He looked, I don't know, like he was recalculating something." "And Mom?" Vera was quiet. "She's angry. But there are people in there asking questions she doesn't have easy answers to." That, I thought, was the point. In the weeks that followed, the ripples spread exactly as I had anticipated, and not always as I had planned. Several of my parents' church friends, women my mother had known for decades, reached out to her privately. Not to condemn, but to ask. "Is it true? Did you really miss her graduation? Her birthday?" My mother, who had constructed a flawless public image of the devoted matriarch, suddenly found that image asking questions back at her. My father called me 10 days after the party. Not to shout, not to defend himself. He called and he said, "Sahara, I need you to know that I heard you. I'm not saying everything at once because I need to think. But I heard you." That call mattered more than I expected it to. My mother did not call for 3 weeks. When she did, she opened with, "I don't appreciate how you handled that." We spoke for 45 minutes, the longest honest conversation we had ever had. She didn't apologize, not in the way I needed, but she acknowledged things she had never acknowledged before. I am choosing to count that as a beginning rather than an ending. Tobias, predictably, was furious and told several family members that I had attacked the family. Most of them, having now seen the slideshow or heard about it, received this with considerably less sympathy than he expected. What changed was not a sudden transformation. Families don't work that way, and I am too old and too tired to pretend otherwise. What changed was the dynamic. The invisible agreement that said Sahara will absorb this and say nothing was formally, publicly terminated. They knew it. I knew it. Everyone who'd been in that hall knew it. I am no longer the furniture. I went to Portugal in July. July 18th, a Thursday afternoon, I landed in Lisbon in the late heat of the day, took a taxi to the hotel with the balcony overlooking the river, set my bag down in the middle of my room, walked out to the balcony, and stood there in the orange light of the Tagus River at golden hour, and I cried. Not from sadness. From something more complicated than that. From the relief of being somewhere I had chosen, completely alone, completely myself, with no one to account for and no one to disappear in front of. I spent 5 days there. I did the wine tour. I ate pastéis de nata in a tiny cafe in Alfama and watched the trams and took photos of nothing except things that were beautiful to me. I called no one. I returned no messages for 4 days and sent a single group text. "I am fine. I am in Portugal. I will be home Sunday." My mother responded, "Okay. Be safe. We love you." I looked at those 3 sentences for a while. Then I put my phone down and went back to my wine. Now, 6 months later, I am still standing. My relationship with my parents is different, more honest, more careful, more truthful than it has ever been. It is not perfect, and I have stopped expecting perfect. My father and I have had several real conversations, the kind we never had before, and I think we are both finding our way towards something genuine. My mother and I are slower. We are working on it, one honest conversation at a time. Tobias and I are cordial at family events and nothing more. I don't hate him. I simply no longer make space in my life for people, including family, who have demonstrated that they will not make space for me. To anyone listening who recognizes their own story in mine, the endless accommodation, the invisible labor, the love that never quite comes back in the right shape, I want to say this. You are not dramatic. You're not too sensitive. You are not asking for too much when you ask to be seen. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for a family that has never had to look at itself honestly is to hold up the mirror. Not to destroy them. Not to win. just to finally, after all this time, make the invisible visible. My name is Sahara. I am 31 years old. I have my apartment, my career, my small circle of people who show up when it matters. And last month, I booked my next solo trip. This time, Greece. I can't wait.